All right. Hello, hello, and good afternoon. Welcome, welcome to those of you who are in the room on time. Uh, we are excited today. Welcome to actually, you know what? I'm going to give a couple of seconds just for us folks. Usually I give about a minute to see if anybody else wants to join us today. And then we'll jump into some of this exciting stuff. Oh my gosh, I'm super excited. Right, see a couple of people just sort of moseying in. Ah, glad to have you here, Sim. Yes, I'm excited for season 5. It is going to be a time for sure. Okay, so we'll jump in because I always want to make sure I honor your time and that we start on time and end on time, especially for those of us who make it on time. And then, folks can sort of come in along the way should they choose to do so. So welcome to season number 5 of the Relationship Series. Here we have transformational conversations that help us to have better relationships, that help us to revolutionize our relationships. We heal for real, we do the work, and we sow what we want to grow. I am Genevieve. I am passionate about relationships. I love all things relationships on the topic of relationships. And again, I developed this passion and I share this each time. I developed this passion in my teens when a lot of my relationships were going crazy. A lot of things were happening. My parents got a divorce. I lost friends, all that kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, my goodness, there has to be a better way because it affected my well-being, my sense of self, my quality of life so much. I thought, my goodness, there must be a better way. I really do believe we are born for relationships. We are created for that purpose. And so anytime spent figuring out how to do relationships better will enhance our quality of life, but also enhance our sense of purpose in our lives. So I'm a therapist, I'm a traveler, I'm a fellow journeyer and instructor, coach, therapist by trade, all the labels and those kinds of things. But I truly enjoy this. And what is this? This is sharing with people how to pursue connection over currency as a main source of value, fulfillment, and joy in our lives. So that's where I'm at, and that's who I am. I know y'all in the room, so I mean, you can share in the chat if you choose to do so. But it is good to have you here for season number 5, where we are going to be looking at some books that that enhance our lives, but that have a lot of information that can mentor us and that can give us sort of low risk, high return, right? So it's low risk to buy a book, right? You just buy a book. It's a book. We have it forever. You can also do Audible, audio books and things like that, which are a lot of fun. But essentially, you have a book. It's got a lot of information, a lot of value in it. Low risk because you paid probably $20 for it, but high returns because you have it and the information that it has from months, years, weeks, whatever, of the person who wrote it, their experience, their life experience and wisdom. So high return. So we're going to be looking at some books. I am a certified coach with Maxwell Leadership. And so we're going to be looking at a lot of my mentors' books, some of my favorite John Maxwell books this season, and maybe a few other authors as well. So we will jump right in. So today, our topic is Grow Up. We'll be looking at the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. Our agenda is as follows. We'll look at some SAQs, which are self-awareness questions. We'll look at some quotes as usual. We'll look at some gaps in learning. We'll also look at some of the laws. We're not going to look at all of the laws today. We are going to look at them very briefly, quickly, as they pertain to and can relate to our relationships. We're going to look at about 10 of them. And then I'll tell you about how we can sort of do a deeper dive into some more of the laws. So our purpose is to explore how the principles of personal growth can enhance and transform our relationships. And we're going to learn today how growth laws can lead us into deeper connections, better communication, and more fulfillment, really, in our relationships. And then at the end, we'll do some question and answer, some sharing. Again, I am interruptible. So if you guys want to throw your mics on and share, ask a question, throw a comment in the chat, I am super open to that and welcoming and inviting of that. Our SAQs or self-awareness questions will help us to also do that. And I'm very interruptible. I love more conversation and interaction than anything else. But again, we are here to, I know I'm here to add value to you, and we are here to learn and to enhance ourselves. So I will attempt to make it through the material as well. All right, so relationship series, here are a few questions that I just want you to ponder, given the fact that we are all unique, right? You agree that we're all unique. Most of us do things like this. We study, we go to school, we take courses, we share our stories and listen to other people's stories because we want in some way to like have fuller lives, have like expanded lives, right? Have more perspective. And so one of the things that growth can help us do is move closer to our potential, right? So I don't know if have you reached your full potential in life? I don't know if you've reached your full potential in life, but I know I haven't. And so that compels me to keep asking the question, like, what do I want out of life? What do I want from my life? What do I want more of in my life, kind of thing, right? And so we're looking at growth today. And so I want us to think about how we define growth for ourselves, and if that connects back to what we want out of life, right? Because in my mind, I think to myself, we have to do something else or more in order to have different or more in our lives, right? So what do you want out of life? I want you to take like 10, 15 seconds to just think about that. And then how do you define growth? If it hasn't been a thought in your mind and you haven't really, thought about it before, just kind of think of off the top of your head, what would you say to somebody else if they said, hey, define growth for me right on the spot? Okay. So what do you want out of life? How do you define growth, right? Do you want to be better tomorrow than you are today? Right? Are you doing the challenge to grow 1% every day? I think that's a James Clear challenge, right? In Atomic Habits. Are you betting on yourself? Are you going against yourself, right? Can I be a better version of myself tomorrow than I was today? If you work out, are you going to do more reps tomorrow? Are you going to lift more weights tomorrow than you did today? Or are we coasting? Right? Are we plateauing? Are we sort of staying the same and trying to not to ruffle too many feathers, or just sort of maintain and sustain? And that's okay too, right? It just depends on what we want out of our lives. Because if we say we want more, we want greater, we want better, we want all these things, we can't stay the same, right? We have to be leveling up. We have to be pressing and pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones and so on. So how do you define growth? What do you want out of life? 2 questions. To think about, and you can for sure share if you choose to do so, if you'd like to. And I see somebody posted in the chat. Let me see here. How do I see the chat? There we go. Growth, actively pursuing knowledge and understanding to the point where it shifts and changes our behavior. Did you copy and paste that definition? Because that sounds amazing. I love that. You know what I love in that? I love shifting, right? Shifting. It doesn't mean that there's like a cataclysmic, chant. No, I'm just smart. Thank you, KK. Appreciate that. And you are smart. But I love that idea of shifting, right? Shifting things and changing our behavior, because that's essentially what growth does and what growth produces. So thank you so much for sharing that. She said I'm just smart. It's hilarious. Okay, so growing ourselves today guarantees that we will be different in some way tomorrow. That is a fact. And I'm going to ask you some more questions, but I don't know how to get this chat off my screen. That's hilarious. There we go. Okay. All right, some more questions for you. What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? So this is a question, we hear it a lot in team building, in organizations and groups and so on. What would you do What would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? I'm going to follow this question up with an addendum, okay? So especially in relationships, when we're talking about our relationships with others, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail, right? Some of us might be saying exactly what I'm doing now. I'm sowing, I'm giving, I'm pouring out, I'm filling my own cup, I'm doing the self-care, I'm telling others how I feel about them, I'm expressing myself authentically, I'm living out loud, I'm doing all the things. And some of us are a little bit more apprehensive, right? We're kind of scared to express ourselves or to be vulnerable or to be open. We don't want people to judge us, to leave us, to think of us as a burden. We have a lot of internal things that are going on as it pertains to relationships, and so we are hesitant to be our full selves in the context of relationships. And so, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? Again, just a point for you to think about. Everything, everything. Clenny said everything. I would attempt everything. I love that. And so the follow-up question to that is, what would you do if you knew you would fail? So not you could not fail, but what would you do if you knew you would fail, but it could lead to success? Right? There's a difference there. There's a difference. If you knew you wouldn't fail, there would be no risk. There would be no risk. I mean, you were going to get everything you ever wanted. You were going to do everything you ever put your mind to. There was no failure. But this question asks us to consider a more realistic perspective. What would you do if you knew you would fail, but it could lead to success? And again, success defined many different ways. And so you'd have to look at your own definition of success. But whatever your definition of success is, it came with a cost, came at a price, and the price was failure at some point. At some point, you didn't get what you wanted. At some point, you didn't do all the things you wanted to do. What would you still do? What would be worth it for you? Right? So I want you to just think about that. And I think about myself and the things that I have now, the things that I enjoy the most. And I've never achieved anything without some degree of failure. You know, and I think to myself, if I couldn't have what I have now, I wouldn't, like, it wouldn't be worth it for me, right? Like, I want what I have now because I like what I have now. I like who I am now. I like how I'm developing and growing. I like my social circles, my community. I like my perspectives, my outlooks on life, my mindset. I love what I do, my work. I love how I can serve people. I love all of that. But all of that came at a cost, came with sacrifice, came with failures, right? But for me, it was worth it. I'm like, if I had to fail to get what I have, again, yes, sign me up every time. But some of us, you know, our lives and the things that we have and where we're at aren't worth it for us, right? So I want you to really think about it. What would you do, especially in the context of self-development, growth, relationships, relationship goals? You know, what would you do if you knew you would fail, but it could lead to success? So again, just a point to think about as you develop, as we all develop self-awareness together. And then one more question. Do you have a personal growth plan? And so this was a question that I was asked, I'm going to say a couple years back, and I didn't have a personal growth plan, not in the formal sense. I knew some things that I wanted to do. I knew some places I wanted to go. I knew some things that I wanted to achieve, but I didn't really have a plan to get there, an active, intentional plan, right? Here's what I want to do in the next 3 months. Here's how I want to grow in the next 6 months. Here's what I want to accomplish in the next 9 months. And so I didn't really have a plan for personal growth. And I started creating one. I started creating one, right? For my relationships, for my career, my company, or my own business, for my spiritual development, you know, in my life. And I thought about how do I want to grow myself so that in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, that I'm intentionally different, right? And what's going to move the needle the furthest, the fastest, so to speak. And so this is a question for you all. Do you have a personal growth plan? What does it look like? What does it sound like? You know, how do you go about tweaking it, creating it? You know, that kind of thing. Kalenia, thank you so much for your chat comments. And again, feel free if you guys can speak, if you guys are listening, that's cool too. But if you guys want to throw your mics on and share, you can definitely do that. Kalenia, comment in the chat. I feel like I would need to know what I would end up gaining in the end. Otherwise, my brain would end up interpreting the question as what am I willing to fail at and have that be the end. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's how most of us think, right? We do think in that way. And um, the sacrifice is thinking about it before we start and not having any guarantees and knowing that we have no control over the outcome. And so part of the process and the journey itself becomes our gain, right? And sometimes we don't want to think about it that way because we're like, but wait, what do I get out of this? But if we take time to think of it that way, what do you gain on the way, right? Those things are takeaways as well. Resilience and consistency and discipline and all these kinds, and maybe even more awareness of what it is that we actually do want, and awareness of what's actually important to us, what we can say yes to and no to. All of those are gains on the way to what we think we want to achieve. And sometimes the thing that we want to achieve, the outcome, the goal changes along the way, right? But I hear you. And part of it is hijacking our natural way of thinking or our automatic way of thinking in order for us to choose and move. So choose what we want to do and move towards it, and to do so swiftly and with courage, right? Even if we can't guarantee the outcome. I see a comment in the chat: personal growth plans give me hope and focus. I need to create a personal growth plan. How do I start one? I'm glad you asked. So here we are today. We're going to be doing that. I'll be letting you guys know at the end how we're going to be able to do that. And personal growth, again, we're looking at growth specifically as it pertains to relationships. And so we'll be talking about that in a moment. But we're also looking at growth overall as a person in our lives. And once we enhance ourselves, once we grow ourselves, then we show up differently in our relationships, which naturally enhances the quality of our relationships. Okay. So we'll be looking at that. Thank you so much, Rhoda, for that question. So these again are just questions for you guys to think about. And just grow in your own personal self-awareness of like where you're at. This is a Zig Ziglar quote. He says, a goal that is casually set is freely abandoned at the first obstacle. And I remember distinctly, before like AI came along, we actually wrote papers in school. We actually had to do research. We had to go to the library. We had to find we had to search out the journal articles. We had to figure out, the information that we were going to write about. We had to read, other authors and other minds on the topic and so on. So library visits, note-taking, research, journal reading, all of that stuff, countless hours. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I just want to finish the paper. And I would think about like these were the moments where I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Like I've gotten to like the middle of the paper maybe, or I can't think of any more things, or I can't put all the thoughts together and summarize and so on. And I would be like, how about if I don't submit this? Like, what if I just didn't submit this assignment? Like, how bad would my grade be? Like, how far would my grade drop? You know what I mean? Like the goal, very casual, like, hey, I want to finish this degree. But obstacles are like hard work. Obstacles become the difficult things that we have to get through, that we have to surpass in order to accomplish the thing, right? And this quite often happens in our relationships, like relationship wise. How many of us have casually set goals for our relationships, or it's sort of in the back of our mind? We set sort of intentions like, oh, I want to have better relationships, right? Very, very like casually set. But like, what does that mean? What happens? So I go into a relationship and I'm thinking, oh, I want to have a great relationship. I'm going to show up as my best self. And then all of a sudden we have an argument and we want to run for the hills, right? Because now we faced some kind of adversity. And so and especially in our cancel culture today, we want to drop we want to drop everything at the first sign of, oh my goodness, she didn't make me happy, or she upset me, or he didn't make me happy, or he didn't buy me the thing, or he didn't take me to the restaurant that I wanted to go to. We're just like cancel culture, ghost, block and delete. All of that, is happening and going on as it pertains to relationships and our connections with one another. Right, we're not investing the kind of time and energy that it requires, or that it takes, and not pursuing, even in the face of obstacles, when our relationships don't go the way that we want them to go without problems, right? And maybe that's an unrealistic expectation in and of itself that we need to recognize within ourselves and check ourselves on, right? So, another sort of quote to think about, and I'll give you, let me see, we'll do 2 more, or maybe 3 more. Growth is happiness. I've heard this quote. And one of the things that I get to do journeying with clients is like hear how they've tried to achieve happiness. Most people come to therapy and they're like, I don't feel good. I just want to be happy in my life. I just want peace. And so we're like, okay, so how have you tried? What have you tried? What have you done in order to achieve this happiness? And people will say things like, oh, I tried this self-care thing, or I tried to, coping mechanisms. Some people do escapism, that kind of thing. But growth, I heard this quote, well, growth has been my source of happiness. And I was like, oh, that's a really great quote. I love that. And the pursuit of growth means that you get to constantly evolve and constantly see yourself evolving, and that builds confidence in yourself. And I love that idea of connecting it to a happy place, right? Because growth is your own pursuit. It's within your control, right? You can do that regardless. I think it was Nelson Mandela quote. He says, nobody can take away your education. Nobody can take away what you put into yourself, what you read, what you ingest, and how you allow that to shape your mindset and shape your outlook and your perspective on life. And he was in a jail cell, like, you know what I mean? So, I mean, he was confined completely without access to, a lot of the things that we have the benefit of accessing on a daily basis. And so growth is a very personal and within our control thing. And we can take full advantage of it in order to add to our happiness. And then unhappiness. This is a great definition of unhappiness. I don't know who can relate, but I could relate to this. Unhappiness is not knowing what we want, and killing ourselves to get it. Like we're pursuing something, we're like we're in this like rat race, we're like always on the grind, on the hustle, trying to get something. We don't even know what it is, but we're just trying. We're like, oh my God, we just want to be happy, we want to be content, we want to be at peace, we want something to fill us up, we want something, to give us a sense of meaning, right? But we don't know exactly what that is. So we do the consumerist things, or the materialism thing, right? So we're like, oh wait, what if I get that car? What if I get that house? What if I live in that neighborhood? What if I get that outfit? Right? What if I hang out with those people? What if I go to that club? What if right? Like we're like, oh, constantly. What if I lose this amount of weight so I can fit into this outfit, so I can go to this party, so I can, all these things we're like pursuing, but killing ourselves, to get this thing, to fill this internal void, right? We don't know what we want. And it creates unhappiness at the end of the day. It creates discontent. It creates anxiety. It creates sadness, depression. We're scrolling on social media. Who's doing what? Who's here? Who's doing, what if I can be like this person? And then we're comparing ourselves to this other person, right? Like that creates unhappiness. It is the opposite of discontent, right? And I can definitely relate to this. There was a time in my life where I worked at a job I didn't like. I kept wishing the days away, wishing I was somewhere else doing something else. I didn't know what, but just something else that would fill me up and that would make me feel better. I didn't have a clear idea, right? And I mean, I grew up in church. I'm a person of faith. I grew up in church with the messaging, like we all have a purpose and we're all created for a reason, to answer a question. And even still, I was on the lookout, for like, what is this purpose thing? But I still tried a lot of things, and I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to life and what wanted life and what was important in life. I worked for CRA. I studied multiple things. I did like 6 minors in school. You know, I wanted to be a writer first, and then I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and then I wanted to do languages. And then like there were so many. I wanted to be an actress. I wrote plays. I act. You know, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a French teacher. I did a lot of things. You know, marketing, fitness, a lot of things. Just trying to figure it out. Right? Killing myself to get it, that thing that would like fill me up and give me this sense of like, yeah, I've arrived. Right? But that's unhappiness at the end of the day. And we're not doing the thing. We're not pursuing the thing or doing the thing right, so to speak. And I put that in uplifted commas because we get to define right for ourselves. But for me, I didn't want to be unhappy, and so that wasn't right for me. Okay, let me see. How many quotes do I have? 2 more quotes. Okay. Human beings are the only species that don't innately strive to reach their full potential. I mean, that's kind of sad, isn't it? Kind of sad to think about that. You know, when we look outside, we look at nature, and nature gives us a lot of information. You know, we see nature, and the trees are growing, they're stretching, they're going towards the sky, and every year they're getting bigger. And you know, we grow physically, but our full potential is actually internal. It has to do with our mind, our capacity. You know, and we look around, we see the things, the structures that are being built. I went to Panama. I was in Panama the last few weeks, and man, we went through the Panama Canal, and just like this monstrous demonstration of like human capacity, right? For innovation, for creativity, and then for actual execution. Like it's amazing. Like my brain almost couldn't even fully understand. Like I don't understand. How did men do this? You know, and it was years in the making, but someone had a vision. Someone had it in their imagination. And like, what if we connected these 2 oceans together? You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of potential within us. I think the statistic is we don't even use near 10% of our brain capacity, our brains. And some of us use more, and most of us use less. But you know, we're constantly, and our society is very much like that. You know, we're constantly kind of encouraged to use less and less of our brain capacity, and we're trying to make things more convenient, make things faster, make things easier. And so we don't have to do more. We don't have to do much, right? Even my example earlier, and I was saying, you know, in order to write a paper back in the day, I had to go to the library, I had to look up journal articles, and then now everything's online and everything's at the click of a finger. And, you know, we've got Google and we've got AI to write our papers for us and all this kind of stuff. Like we're making things easier so that we don't have to use our brains as much. And we are pretty much encouraged not to, you know, reach our full potential as developmental beings. So I think it's kind of sad, but I also think it's a point of sort of acknowledgement. Like here's where we are, but we can do more, right? And we can have more. And here's a relationship quote: "Our philosophy is not best expressed in words; it is expressed in the choices we make. So in the long run, we shape our lives and we shape ourselves. And there is no place that this is more true than in our relationships. What we say does not matter as much as what we do in our relationships. And this, you know, trips us up every time because contrary to popular belief, we can't just do what we want. You know, oh, she trying to change me, he trying to change me, and I'm not changing for nobody and all this kind of stuff. Like, unless we live in a cabin in the woods alone, right? We have to interact and engage with people. And that means we have to constantly adjust what we're doing, how we're presenting, how we're showing up, how we're speaking, our tone of voice, our facial expressions, our behaviors, our attitudes, right? The choices that we make. And all of that shapes our lives. So if we have trash relationships and we have, you know, toxic relationships, and we are constantly, you know, we constantly have narcissism and not, I mean, I've heard this word 1 million times in the last like year and a half. We're constantly involved with narcissists and all this stuff. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not diagnosing anybody. And most of us out here are not psychologists, and we probably ought not to be diagnosing anybody. You know, there's a quote, it says the wise man, I don't remember who said this quote, the wise man asks himself questions. It is the fool that asks others, or asks questions of him. Anyway, the wise person will be like, okay, what about me? What's going on with me? As opposed to, you did this and you need to change, and all those kinds of things. So This is very important for our relationships, right? Expressing ourselves in the ways that we want to receive a return. And so if we want harmonious relationships, or if we want relationships with integrity and with quality and with openness and with space and with vulnerability and with trust, then we have to develop those things and model those things within ourselves first, right? Okay, so let's get into some gaps. Gaps, these are growth gaps. That we each, and you guys can identify which ones are the most the most impactful for you. I know I probably have ended up in each one of these gaps at some point and had to work my way out. So there's the assumption gap. The assumption gap for growth is I assume that I will automatically grow. That's the assumption gap. Okay. The knowledge gap is I don't know how to grow. So there's a gap in knowledge. I don't know what to do in order to grow. And I think Rhonda asked the question earlier. She said, okay, I don't have a personal growth plan. What do I do? How do I do that? That's a knowledge gap. The timing gap for growth is it's not the right time to begin. Okay. And so, you know, it's sort of like, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it next week, or I'll get to that. Right? This is not the right time. There's a lot going on in my life. There's a lot happening. You know, there's stress. There's, you know, maybe there's been a transition, a breakup, a loss. You know, maybe I lost my job, or whatever the case is, a timing gap. It's not the right time. It's not the right time to get married. It's not the right time to sacrifice. It's not the right time to work on my judgmental way of thinking. It's not the right time to have kids. It's not the right time to shift jobs. It's not the right time to move. It's hardly ever the right time. I'm going to say that. But taking action and moving, or not moving, but not moving like countries, but just taking action and moving yourself to the next step or the next stage, quite often reveals to you what it is that you require in the moment in order to accomplish the goals. But anyways, the timing gap, that was a big thing for me. I'm a timing gap person. Like I'm gonna put it off. I'm gonna put things off. You know, I remember I used to wake up every morning and I would repeat to myself, do it now, 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 do it now. Right? Because I had to like train my brain to be active and to not put things off. Because I would, oh yeah, I'll just do that later. Yeah, I'll get to that. You know, and I would sit down. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're not doing anything. You can do it. You can do it now. So the timing gap, and sometimes this is a perfectionism thing. Like if I can't get it done exactly the way I want to, or you know, perfectly, then I'm not going to do it at all. Right. And it sounds counterintuitive because you'll probably never do anything, but sometimes that trips us up, right? We're like, okay, no, if I can't get it right, I'm not going to do it at all. So the timing gap, that's a gap to growth. The mistake gap, this is a huge one. I'm afraid of making mistakes. And this can certainly hinder our willingness or capacity to grow or to move into areas that are uncomfortable for us because we're afraid. Listen, I feel that. I feel that deep down on the inside, right? Nobody really likes to make mistakes unless, and framing again is everything, unless we recognize what mistakes can do for us. Right? So mistakes are not just for humiliating us or embarrassing us. Mistakes are for revealing to us areas that we can work in. Mistakes are for opportunities to tweak things, to make things better, to put systems in place. Like mistakes actually help us grow. And the fear that comes from making a mistake is usually associated with others, right? And most of the time, and I've said this a number of times, but we can recover from anything. We can literally recover from, except babies, sorry, except for children, because babies, you know, they kind of come and you can't put them back in the womb. But mostly everything else we can recover from, right? If you lose money, you can make money back. If you fail a class, you know, you can do the class over. You know, if you like you know, it's all those things. Like we can recover from everything. Clinia said the perfection gap. Yeah, this is the mistake gap. But the perfection gap is the next one. Have to find the best way before I start. Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of, I think, a lot of our internal makeup. But I also think that connects back to the mistake gap, right? Because we don't want to make a mistake, or we don't want people to think, oh, what, to judge whatever we put out there, or whatever we're doing. And especially when it comes to relationships, um, there is no way to show up perfectly. We're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna be moody at times. We aren't gonna have the best judgment all the time, right? And so we have to really give ourselves grace and give other people grace as well, right? We're giving people the benefit of the doubt to show up as their authentic selves. And I know our society is very like keen on flawlessness. We're like, here, wear all this makeup, here, get all these nips and tucks, here, do all these things so that you can be flawless, so you can be perfect, and so on. But that's just not human. And part of it is like really unlearning some of these crazy ideas that people have given us over time and that we've bought into, right? Like, oh my God, I have a pimple, I can't go outside. Pimples are actually normal, I promise you that, right? Like, but there's a $1 billion industry that's designed for you to give money in order for you to get rid of pimples as quickly as possible, or never get a pimple. And like, oh, take these pills and take this and all the ointments and creams and all these things. And it's like, well, I mean, come on. Like, it's a pimple. It's natural. It's normal. It's like wrinkles. They're natural and normal. They're an indication that you're human, that you're living, and that you're growing, that you're aging, right? And so we have to start rethinking and unlearning some of these ideas that we've internalized and that we've taken as truth. We've believed, we've hunkered down and like, dug in our heels, and we're like, no, this is the way that things are. This is the way that things are supposed to be. And some of those ideas are really worth reconsidering, revisiting, and even, unlearning. So yeah, that's my little spiel on that. The inspiration gap, I don't feel like doing it, right? Some of us are just not motivated. We don't have the energy. And in the clinical space, we talk about emotional reasoning, right? And so because I don't feel like it, it means I can't do it, right? We take the feeling and we make it fact. And just because you don't feel like it actually doesn't matter. If you don't feel like it, if you decide to do it, you can do it, right? So the inspiration gap, depending on the feeling in order to get the thing done. I see a comment. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The comparison gap, others are better than I am. That's a big one. Social media is notorious for that. We go on social media and I can't remember her name, but there's a YouTuber I came across, and oh goodness, if I remember her name, I'll tell you guys next time. But she does evaluations of influencers' profiles, and I think it's called Influencer Insanity. And she goes through their profiles and she's like, this is fake and this is a lie and this is and it's actually hilarious. But for me, it's very informative because and I don't consume a lot, but I do know that a lot of us, especially a lot of my clients, do consume a lot and are finding themselves comparing themselves to the lives of, I hear back. Who's talking? Does anybody want to show up? Who wants to comment? Okay, well, you can turn your mic on and you can certainly comment. I don't know who put their mic on. But we're comparing ourselves to people's fake lives, right? We're comparing our personal, for real lives, our day-to-days with fake people's with people's fake lives. Like, people have cameras and camera crews and all this kind of people have makeup artists to do their makeup and their hair and to dress them in a certain way, and then they're on she did a video on trad wives, and trad wives are there and they're making all this stuff from scratch and they have their babies and they're dressed immaculately, and you go behind the scenes and they have like a 25-man crew. You know what I mean? But like, regular moms are out here and they're like, oh my God, I'm not like this woman, and I'm failing at life. And it's like, no, you're actually doing life. You're doing life the normal way. It's a struggle. It's stressful at times. It can be distressing, to raise a child and to have a family and to take care of yourself and all that kind of stuff. But you're comparing your life to a fake life, right? So comparison gap, others are better than I am. That can be definitely a growth gap, right? And so I don't even want to get into a relationship because like this person's relationship is so great. I'm never going to be able to do that. Or I came from a house where my parents were divorced, or I was adopted, or whatever the case is. I'm never going to be able to have these great quality relationships because I didn't learn it, or because I didn't have it, or because, and so that can be a hindrance at times, discouraging at times to us to pursue quality relationships and quality, and ways of showing up in relationships that enhance a relationship. So the expectation gap is the last one. I thought it would be easier than this. It's hard. It's hard. I think, setting our expectations realistically can be really helpful. Yes, I will post the YouTube channel, Simone. Yeah, setting realistic expectations can be really helpful here, especially when things don't happen as quickly or as smoothly as we hoped or as we would like them to. Right? The best things in life don't come to us. We have to go to them. They don't roll down the hill to us. We have to climb uphill to them. It's hard. It's a struggle. It's stressful. We've got to do it though, in order to have what we want, to grow in the ways that we really desire. Okay, so I'll be mindful of the time. We're going to go through these 10 laws very quickly. And again, I'll let you guys know at the end how we can do a deeper dive, and then also how we can get into personal growth plans. And so we're relating this to relationships, right? So there's a law of intentionality. Growth doesn't just happen by accident, okay? It requires intentional effort. And so when we approach relationships with intention and we are deliberate about spending our quality time or looking at our love languages, right? Thinking about the person that is our friend or our coworker or our mentor or our loved one, our spouse, our parent, our child, whatever relationship we're talking about, and even faith relationships, right? So we're talking about God as well. We want to be deliberate about spending quality time, about setting those relationship goals, about having a vision of some sort about where this relationship is going, your purpose in the relationship, right? Like, what am I here for? How am I adding value? How am I making an impact, right? Am I investing in somebody else's growth? Am I intentional about my actions? Am I building the things that I value, like trust and honesty, vulnerability, openness? Is there depth here? Is there like connection here? Is there safety here? Right? So growth doesn't just happen in relationships. Those things don't just magically appear. We have to pursue them. We have to both model and embody them, and then we actually have to pursue them, right? And so we have to set up boundaries and standards and compel and encourage and coach people on how to be in relationships with us, especially if we want to have quality relationships, because it's so easy just to be average and mediocre out here in these streets. It really is. We could just be like, okay, whatever, you're with me, I'm with you, I'm your friend, you're my friend, and then we're not growing. We just kind of coast along. We kind of do things every now and again, check in and so on, but there's no depth, there's no like vibrancy, there's no, like connection, there's no like healing power and capacity and ability, or fulfilling power and capacity and ability. And again, we're looking at trading currency for connection, right? As a way of fulfilling our lives and filling our lives up. So when we're looking at our, your company or your career or whatever, growth doesn't just happen, right? We set metrics for our businesses. We set metrics for, whatever it is that we're doing. So we have to do the same thing in our relationships as well. The law of, did I miss one? No, the law of awareness is know yourself to grow yourself. So the key concept, of course, here is a tenet of one of the 5 pillars of one of the main tenets of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness. This is big and this is key. I've been doing this work, person of the therapist, for like 10 years. And I still don't know myself that well. And so if I'm intentionally doing this work every day, I work on this every single day, and I still don't know myself that well, how much more so, the average person to take time out to grow in self-awareness, right? And then we're looking at, I see a question. You can't change what you're not aware of. Exactly. And I say we can't change what you can't see, right? And that's exactly the quote. Self-awareness helps us to understand ourselves, but then also be able to understand our role in relationships, right? So what are our triggers? What are our communication styles? What are our patterns? What are our triggers, our past experiences, and how they're informing or hijacking our ability to be in the relationships the way that we want to regulate our emotions, those kinds of things. Like, we have to know ourselves in order for us to share ourselves, and then to manage or regulate ourselves well, right? It helps us to respond thoughtfully and also to be proactive. Like, I know I have a strong rejection trigger, right? And so I experienced some things in my past. And so rejection, it hits deep, like really, really deep and quick. And sometimes I get winded, right? And I'm like, woo, and I start spiraling. And I know that about myself. And so I'll share that. And I'll share that mostly in a romantic relationship context, because like, my friends are my friends, and so it doesn't hit as hard. It doesn't hit home as hard. But if I share that, I know that I can call my friends to account, right? So, hey, that I've shared this with you, and so this is how I'm going to need for you to respond to me in this, if this situation ever arises, or whatever the case is, right? So it helps me to respond proactively and thoughtfully, as opposed to impulsively, which leads to, like, other unhealthy ways of, like, being in interactions with other people, right? So I know emotional intelligence is a catchy term. It's very trend, but it is a fundamental quality of relationships, of doing relationships well, right? So we look at self-awareness, it's mandatory. So we need to know ourselves to grow ourselves. The law of the mirror is, you must see value in yourself to add value to yourself. Self-care is a big term as well. I personally have a lot of issues with the ways in which people are promoting self-care, defining self-care, and telling people to do self-care, because I think it's actually not very caring. It's actually very harmful. Like, just go to the spa every week. Sweetheart, that's not going to cut it. But anyways, you must see value and I think that's actually great, because it's a premise. Like, hey, if you value yourself enough to take yourself to the spa every week, then we're starting somewhere. That's a good start, right? But when it comes to relationships, when we appreciate our own worth, we bring positive energy to relationships. And then it also builds our confidence, helps us to, sort of fill our own cup, so that we can, John Maxwell says we can be a river and not a reservoir, right? And there's another quote: we can be a faucet and not a drain in our relationships. We're not there trying to validate me, help me, support me, do all these things for me. And then we're kind of just, like, not doing anything. We're not adding to the relationship. So what we can do in order to help that process is to value ourselves, um, and then to pour into ourselves, so that we can show up in relationships in the best way possible. And that enhances the quality of our relationships and creates, like, dynamic sort of mutual respect in relationships. And so one of the activities that I actually did for this, and it's in the book, right? There's so much in the book. It was to create like a list of 100 things that I value about myself, and, like, my personal qualities. It was hard. It took a while. But I'll throw that out to you guys, and just invite you into the process of learning how to value yourself, so that you can add value to yourself, especially in the context of relationship. This will help you say yes to things that you need to say yes to, no to things you need to say no to, put boundaries in place, to keep yourself well, right? Not necessarily to keep yourself safe, but to keep yourself well. Not in, like, shutting out people or withholding or withdrawing, not those kind of, weird, unhelpful behavioral habits in relationship, but to keep yourself well, to keep sort of like an open place where you can flourish with others. The law of reflection says learning to pause allows growth to catch up with you. So this is very much similar to the law of awareness, self-awareness. So reflection is also required for emotional intelligence, or building emotional intelligence. And when we look at relationships, we want to take the time to reflect on our interactions and the culture of our relationships. What we're learning from them, what we're sowing into them, that kind of thing. Reflection really helps us to identify areas for improvement, what's working. Maybe there's a lot of warmth and so on in your relationships, but there's not a lot of like spontaneity, or evolution kind of thing. So you can look at what's working, what's not working, how your communication can be better, how your expression can be better, that kind of thing. So I said the quote or the question earlier was, the wise man questions himself. So this is a point of questioning yourself. It's this point of introspection. The wise man questions himself while the fool questions others, right? And so this is a place where we can use that premise or that principle to grow in our relationships. One of the things that really helped change my perspective and just my own growth process was learning to make changes to myself and then trusting and watching as they made changes to others and how they related to me. Right. So I wasn't like, you need to change, you need to do things differently, you need to stop doing whatever you're doing. It was more like, okay, what can I do in order to be well? And then seeing how that impacted how other people treated me and responded to me. So I encourage you, create a space. This can be like a journaling space. Create a space, set time aside, and be active and intentional about it. Again, create the space to do the reflection thing, and keep your appointment with yourself, because you're worth it, right? And that's a point of value as well. And I'll be mindful of the time as we move along. I think this is number 5. So the law of consistency: motivation gets you going, discipline keeps you growing. We talked about, I don't necessarily feel like it, as a growth gap. So motivation gets you going, but discipline keeps you growing, right? So consistent effort in showing up in our relationships, being present, communicating, being reliable, being where you are when you say you're going to be there, like simple stuff like that, or texting if you're going to be late, like stuff like that, is discipline, and we're sometimes motivated by how we feel in relationships, by how other people make us feel. But and if you talk to long married people, they'll tell you this, right? When you don't feel like it anymore, you have to rely on like your habits. You have to rely on the habits that you have built. And so if your habit is, I get up and I say good morning, or I text, Kalenia texts me like every day, like, hey, this is your alive check. I'm checking in. Like, what's going on? Are you good? Right. So like that is like habit. And I'm like, oh yes, right. I have to, text back and like let people know I'm alive here. Because I can get into my own head for myself. But it's these sort of consistent habits that help you to remain in relationships and to do relationships well, but to foster the trust and commitment that's required for longevity and sustainability in relationships, right? And so that helps to build the quality of our relationships as well. And consistency compounds. We laugh at the like one hit wonders and the fly by night artists and trends and stuff like that, but we respect people who have gone the long haul, who can recreate themselves, who can reimagine their identity, or their image, who have been married for 50 years, or who've had a company, Fortune 500 company, for 50 years. We respect stuff like that. We admire people who last, who stand the test of time, because each day they're putting in what's required in order to keep whatever it is alive. And so as individuals, we can do that in our own growth process and in our relationships, when we look at them as valuable things to pour into and to consistently sow into on a day-to-day basis, right? I have a friend, she's like 60 some odd years. She had like hip surgery and knee surgery and all these surgeries and whatever, and she's still like out there cycling every day, doing the work consistently. And when even when it hurts, she goes a shorter distance and so on. It's that consistency that's very inspiring, and that discipline to just keep going. And it matters most when we don't feel like it, that we do it. I don't feel like working out today, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right. And this is not like pushing your body to the point where it's harmful. Like, I don't feel like it today because I'm sick. Like, that's a different story. Right. But I don't feel like it today, but I know my body can do it. Right. So I'm not talking about harming yourself, harming your body, or doing things when you're ill or when you're injured, or that kind of thing. I'm talking about literally being consistent when you can. Okay. So The law of consistency, it compounds. Okay, we got 5 minutes. The law of environment, growth thrives in conducive surroundings. I love this law. I love this law. We have to surround ourselves with people who challenge and inspire us, who demonstrate and model what we want to be, how we want to be. If you are the smartest person in the room, you need to get into a new room. That is the bottom line, right? Like, we need to be with people who are strong in other areas, who can help us to grow, right? Iron sharpens iron. It is the truth. And that's why we live in community. People who can see my blind spots will call me out. I can see other people's blind spots. And this is based on relationships and love. This is not like judgy and I'm better than you and all that kind of stuff. No, this is like clean cut, healthy quality relationships. And that's what they're for. That's what they can help us do, right? And so if we put ourselves in particular surroundings, we find tribes and mentors that, support where we want to grow, we can flourish really in those relationships. Mentors are essential. Get mentors, people. Like, add people to your life and pay them if you have to. Get a good therapist if you need to. To me, it's like wanting to lose weight with a pantry full of junk food. Your environment is not conducive to your success. Absolutely, right? It doesn't even make any sense. You're setting yourself up for failure. So I would encourage us to think about like what nourishes us in relationships. What sort of keeps us alive and thriving. It's just sort of those questions, like what is an environment that you can grow in, right? And maybe looking at like what are you giving, what are you sowing, what is your purpose for being there, and what is other people's purpose for being there as well, right? So just thinking about, and it can be a literal environment or it could be a figurative environment, right? Sorry, I just want to keep track of the time. One of the things that I've done in the last couple of years, and I didn't do this before, I didn't know the value of like mentorship, is I've got mentors for each area of my life that I want to grow in, right? So that has really helped. And I've surrounded myself with other people who are doing the things that I want to be doing better. And that's really helped. Sometimes and I've also moved, right? So sometimes in our familiar surroundings, we know ourselves to be a certain way, and the people around us expect a certain thing of us, and so we give them what they expect, but that doesn't allow for other parts of ourselves to grow and to develop. And we might need to literally move, like I literally moved out of the country, but literally move in order for us to see ourselves differently, for us to be exposed to ourselves differently, All right, Fam Jam. I realized that the recording cut out, so I jumped back on to record just the last few slides so that you'd have a full and complete session for today, and I'll just sort of splice it in afterwards. So we were going through the laws. We got to the law of environment. Growth thrives in conducive surroundings. And we all know that our surroundings matter, right? And so I was talking about moving to another country, and in that place, really allowing myself to develop and grow in different ways, to see myself differently as I encountered different scenarios, different groups of people, different cultural values and cultural norms, and so on. And part of our growth really does happen as a result of who we are in contact with. And so as this pertains to relationships, we ought to and need to get into contact with individuals who can model or who have modeled what we want to emulate in the context of our relationship. So if we would like peace, or if we would like cohesiveness or understanding or clarity of expression, things like that, vulnerability, transparency, those are qualities and skills that lend themselves to quality relationships. And so when we want to enhance our relationships, or we want to have relationships that other people have that look good, and not just look good, but that are good, that feel good, because we know when things just look good, right? When we're putting on a show, when we're pretending. So we want to have and embody the true essence and quality of relationships that feel good, that are good and are healthy from the inside out. And so our surroundings can very much determine that. And finding ourselves with good mentors, finding ourselves aligned with people who are like-minded, who are our tribe, so to speak, can be very, very helpful for that. So the law of environment stands as it pertains to relationship. When we're looking at the law of design, to maximize growth, we have to develop strategies, okay? And so the concept here is that we have to approach relationships with some kind of plan, some kind of vision in place. We have to establish goals. We have to establish ways of being, ways of showing up, ways of communicating, different kinds of rituals. And I was sharing that, I have friends who will text me every morning, hey, good morning, how are you doing? And those are the rituals that we have established in our relationships for check-ins and for sharing, or we'll carve out time to jump on a Zoom call and share vulnerably about what it is that we're going through. And have a group of friends who are like, hey, it's time for a check-in. We haven't had a group Zoom call in the last 2 months. What's going on? And so those are the kinds of sort of designs and strategies and systems that we need to put in place for our relationships and stick to them, commit to them, stick to them, so that our relationships can grow and evolve in healthy ways. And we can see the benefit of them as we continue to live and grow, right? And so I want us to be intentional about how we support each other, support each other's growth. And even things like, hey, I heard you were doing a course. Like, how did that course go? How's the course going? How are the assignments going? How's the professor, right? Having some kind of internal plan to keep you aligned and moving in moving in a direction with your loved ones. I didn't used to do this. And so I lose touch with people, we connect months later, years later, and it was fine because, people don't get offended. People are living their lives and so on. But what I found was most enriching was taking time each day, 15 minutes, literally 15 minutes, to just jot down, hey, what happened today? What happened yesterday? What good things did I do today? Who did I support today? What hurt me today? Who did I hurt today? Who do I need to apologize to? Who do I need to forgive? What are literally just like 6, 7 questions, and just journal it out 15 minutes a day. And that really helped me to frame my relationships in a positive way, in a powerful way. And then also, it really did help to what I would call sort of help me to value my relationships more deeply, right? And so I put more time and energy into those relationships. So design is really important. If you don't set a plan in place for that relationship, you don't develop strategies for the relationship, then others will likely do it for you. Maybe social media memes will do it for you. Maybe the other person might do it for you. You may not have a say, So we want to make sure that we have some kind of strategy in place, some kind of idea of what we'd like to have in our relationships. Goals are important. I remember, years and years ago, there was a pastor in the city of Toronto. He used to do F8 goals with the people in his community. And there was like eight F's, and each F stood for like faith, family, friends, different aspects of our lives that we wanted to create goals for. So if you want to, if you want to have better in any areas of your life, you have to create strategies for that. So the law of design means that to maximize the growth, especially in our relationships, we have to develop a plan, have goals, set goals, and don't kick yourself in the foot or set yourself up for failure. If you have a goal to lose weight, don't put a whole bunch of junk food in the cupboard, right? Right. So if you have a goal to go to bed earlier, don't be, online scrolling up until midnight, or get yourself caught in a rabbit hole of YouTube videos. So definitely want to have something in place in terms of a strategy. The law of pain. I love this law. The law of pain says good management of bad experiences leads to great growth. Good management of bad experiences leads to great growth, right? So we have to embrace some of those difficult moments, especially in our relationships, as opportunities for growth, right? Facing conflict and facing the pain facing the disappointments head on can help to deepen our understanding and strengthen our bonds when we manage them well, right? When we manage them with like empathy and with patience, and when we go into it with a certain frame of mind, right? When we know that, hey, you know what? Hardships are going to happen, but here's my plan already in place to face those hardships and how I'm going to frame those hardships. I'm going to see them as opportunities for us to grow as a couple, as a group, as colleagues, as siblings, as parents, as whatever kind of relationship you're looking at, right? Nobody likes pain. We know that. Nobody likes problems and issues and challenges and so on, but they're going to happen. So wishing they didn't happen is not going to help. We have to make sure we face those difficulties, and we do that in a learning sort of posture, right? We're going to learn from the difficulties that are showing up in our lives or in our relationships, and then apply all that we've learned in order to enhance and make better. So the law of the ladder, character growth determines the height of your personal growth. Whoa. So that to me tells me to just build my character. Build your character, because that's going to determine how far I go, right? And so that's integrity, that's kindness, that's honesty, that's all these values that we want to embody in our relationships, that we want to experience in our relationships, but that we don't always choose the behaviors that align with. Right. And so we naturally attract what we're giving off. We naturally attract more fulfilling relationships and better relationships when we have strong character, when we have like deep trustworthiness or respect. Right. So you look at certain people and they show up and they say they're going to show up and they show up. You can rely on them. You can depend on them. They're on time. Like those kinds of people learn to trust them. People learn to like them. People learn to appreciate them, right? And so we want to be those kind of people, but sometimes we don't always follow through on the actions that are required to become those kind of people. I know this is like very, very true for me. So I get it. It's difficult. It's challenging. But at the end of the day, if we have trash relationships or toxic relationships, or, you know, we are emotionally unavailable, or we find ourselves with emotionally unavailable persons or in abusive, you know, relationships, then we really have to take a look in the mirror and wonder about either what we're accepting or what we're projecting that is constantly causing us to show up in certain ways, or accept that other people show up in those ways in our lives. So that's the law of the ladder. And how many more laws do we have? One more law that we're going to go through. Law of the rubber band. Love this law as well. Growth stops when you lose the tension between where you are and where you could be. Woo, my goodness. So don't like settle for like surface level connections. We don't need to do that, right? So it's in between the now and the not yet, right? So when we stretch beyond our comfort zone by having those deeper, more vulnerable, transparent conversations, then we are taking the risks that are necessary to deepen our relationships, to enhance the quality of our relationships. And when we are challenging ourselves to grow and stretching beyond our comfort zones, then our relationships are naturally also growing, right? So when we're too comfortable, too complacent, you know, we're just kind of coasting, we're coming home every day and we're on social media and we're not interacting with the children, or we're at the dinner table and everybody's on their phone, or, you know, we're cool to just Netflix and chill. We never have new adventures and new experiences or plan different things to do, you know, with our spouses. Or, you know, we just kind of go to work every day and we just wish for 5 o'clock to come if we work a 9 to 5. You know, those kinds of behaviors and attitudes, that's comfortable. That's coasting. That's average, right? And so when we're average, then our relationships are going to be, when we have an average, you know, do the bare minimum approach to life, we're going to get the bare minimum in our relationships and in our lives. And that's not fulfilling or satisfying at the end of the day. So we want to look at how we're stretching, how we're getting out of our comfort zones, what we're doing intentionally, right? In order for us to stretch ourselves and to grow and to develop the skills and the qualities and the characteristics that are necessary for the kinds of revolutionary relationships that we want to have. Okay, so that's the law of the rubber band. There are more laws. Again, you guys can get the book. We're going to be masterminding it in a bit. Success, just a few acts of self-discipline practiced daily over a reasonable period of time. That speaks for itself, right? And so if you do the work, daily and you're consistent, law of consistency, then over time you will get what you want. That is the success formula. And very, 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 very similarly, same thing, just a few errors in judgment practiced daily over a reasonable period of time is going to create failure for you. Few errors equals failure, right? And so failure means you just didn't attain what you wanted to attain. Quote for you, the only guarantee that tomorrow will be better is if you're growing today. And that is a quote by John C. Maxwell. Our relationships deserve our growth. That is how I take this. Our relationships deserve our intentional pursuit, our intentional attention every single day. They deserve our personal growth so that we can show up. It is hard developing this kind of mindset because it really does go against the grain of our cultural societal messaging. Every day we're really encouraged to be average, to do the bare minimum, to just sort of coast, to try and get as much as we can. But I promise you the work is worth it. The work is worth it, especially when it comes to the kinds of relationships that we can have, and the quality of our relationships. Esther Perel says it determines the quality of our lives, but I believe that we are created for relationships. And so our relationships are our lives, right? And so we need to put in the work to have great ones, because that's what's going to equate to fulfillment, sense of purpose, sense of accomplishment, actualization, peace, all that stuff that we really truly desire as human beings at the end of the day. And then last quote for you, we either step forward into growth or back into safety. The safe place is the safe place, right? And I would encourage, the safe place doesn't get us what we want. The safe place doesn't mean sense of joy and fulfillment and excitement and having accomplished in life. So growth is probably the better choice there, but you guys can do whatever you want. So what are you going to do? Are you going to step forward into greatness or into growth? I would encourage us not to just be a listener, but to be a doer. And this season we're going to be doing, right? So we're going to make ourselves accountable to doing something, to taking action, not just to having intentions. And if you are listening to the replay, I want you to leave your action step in the comments. What are you going to do? What step are you going to actually take? What's the time of day? When are you going to do? What day is it? Who are you going to do it with and for? What's the actual action? Put an action in place and start taking those incremental steps today towards your growth, towards your development, and of course, towards creating better relationships in your life. And then I want to say this, just an announcement. We're going to be doing a 4-week mastermind. This will be ongoing. So even if you're listening to the replay, just check for the next date that's coming up. We're going to mastermind this book because there is so much richness in here. There are so many exercises, so many practical application exercises that we can all do together and keep ourselves accountable to doing, that will enhance our lives, that will cause us to grow, that will gently drag us out of our comfort zones, put us into the action place, but that will move us towards that place of self-development, more growth, and of course, more enhanced relationships. So we're going to be masterminding it. If you do want to sign up, there will always be a registration link that's coming for the next one. So check it in the comments or check it below, and then we will read the book and flesh out all of the best bits. And then, of course, next week, we'll be looking at another John Maxwell book. It is The 16 Undeniable Laws of Communication, one of my favorites as well. And we'll be relating some of those principles to our relationships as well. Those principles stand on their own, and they can be applied, especially if you are looking to begin a career as a speaker, or if you have a message that you are sharing with a particular group or community. This will be valuable for you. It is valuable, low stakes learning. Okay. And you'll buy the book. You'll have it for ever and ever and ever, as long as the dog doesn't eat it. And you'll be able to reuse, revisit those principles day in and day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. I'll see you guys next week on the relationship series, and have a revolutionary week.